That Alan Quinlan has come in to join us. Martin, what?
Good morning.
That's all you see. I love the only way to scare former rugby players is to throw some Irish at them.
Irish. I was just saying to the lads, if you start out what you did to Rog a few weeks ago, he could converse with you and talk with you.
See, Roger's one of those people full of surprises.
Yeah.
Like, I think you could start with Mandarin with him and he'd find something to throw back at you.
He might speak French with you the next day.
Well, my French wouldn't be as good as his now. It wouldn't at all. Anyway, we're here. First of all, Jacob Stockdale really is the talking point of the weekend. I feel very sorry for him.
Yeah, it's tough when that happens in sport. I think for he'd all the hard work done. You know, it was a sensational break, and he's done it before. Unfortunately, he kind of goes right over the line and doesn't dive, and people can analyse that and stuff. And it's just one of those things that you've got to be really sure in those tight games about dotting the ball down and stuff. So it's very difficult. I think we all feel sorry for him. He was superb on Saturday, as were Ulster, and you think that would have stretched their lead out. Would Leinster come back from that? They have the credentials and the mindset and the mentality for sure but it would have put Ulster in a great position. And you know, he's tweeted about it or put a message on Instagram and stuff, and he feels devastated after the game. And unfortunately, that was the talking point, really.
Any reason why he's doing it, Alan? Like, is he looking to kind of get in?
Yeah, probably he's looking to go around under the post. Maybe I'm not sure what his mentality is. I think he's done that in the under-20s before, and a lot of his tries he goes right in around. You know, so I suppose look, it's easy to analyse it and see what's wrong within the action. But I think when you have a sniff of a line like that, there you've got to dive and. When I scored the very few tries that I did score in my career, I did, if I was completely clear, I dotted them down as I was kind of on the run. But if there's any sort of contact or people around there, you can see the picture there. It's heartbreaking when you come off a field and it's about you and you feel, and he probably exasperates that in his own mind. So it was very disappointing for him and for Ulster, and I certainly feel sorry for him. But he has to learn, and that's the ruthless nature of sport. He just has to make sure that doesn't happen again. Yeah,
like I am aware of just doing some like research in my other life, whatever, that sometimes rugby players, or in any sport, but especially rugby, there's kind of your mind kind of holds you back from kind of throwing your body down for some reason, even though they've no problem going into tackles and stuff.
Yeah.
That sometimes there's a psychological thing that just goes against you of throwing your body down onto a line. I just remember reading, I can't remember the top of my head, like an academic paper about how some players in Australia had an issue with this, for example, that it was just, they felt this mental block that for some reason they just didn't feel safe, you know, just kind of to leap into the air and throw themselves down. Would you be aware of that?
Yes, rugby league players seem to do it more, where they dive all the time. Because I don't know, is it a fear that, because there's a lot of slapping the hands in rugby league and stuff like that, and there's a real focus on getting into passing channels and going after the ball, if you like, whereas rugby union is more technique in some of the tackles, and people are trying to, for sure they're trying to tag the ball, but it's just different. I would have always preferred to run over the line and kind of dot it down on the run. But if there's any, there's certain games, and you've got to realise you're not in open space, and if there's any threat anywhere around. But look, it's just freakish. Sometimes you can't explain why these things happen. 9 times out of 10, he just touches that down as normal, as he does a lot. And it's a try, and it's a significant score, and it gives him a bit of breathing space. And it just didn't happen. So he's just got to be more careful with that and dive on some occasions, but that's that anticipation when you're in that situation yourself. And unfortunately, it's something that's going to be highlighted and regretful, but they can't change it now. He can just make sure in the future that he dives in those situations.
I thought Dan McFarland dealt with it very well, because he was obviously getting a barrage of questions afterwards about the incident, and Dan was making very sure that he wasn't going to hang out one of his players.
Yeah, he's got to protect him, I think, and he's
absolutely.
a young player, and he's achieved so much in his career so far, and scoring all those tries last year in the Six Nations, and being involved with Ireland, and you know, the try against the All Blacks and stuff. And so look, he has to protect him, and I thought that was the right thing to do. And it's just unfortunate that there's a lot of focus on this, and it has to be spoken about. Coaches who coach young kids will obviously, that they'll see that and say, look what can happen at the top level, and you've got to make sure. But unfortunately, it does happen. We've seen a fair few of them over the years where people lose the ball when they're over celebrating or something like that. I think there was a slight smile coming on his face where he thought he
was already over the line in the head, maybe. Yeah. It's a hard lesson to learn.
It is, yeah.
Dan Levy, that's a big loss for Ireland as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, because I think personally for the player it's a massive blow, and it was a significant knee injury. I think the replays didn't show the injury again, because I think it didn't look good. It's so unfortunate for him, you know, given the year he had last year and the success he had. And unfortunately, it's just the nature of the game, Anthony. And some guys, there was times in my own career where I thought, why again, you know? Tommy O'Donnell in Munster at the moment just can't buy a bit of luck the last 3 or 4 years with injuries, and it happens. Some players, Sean O'Brien has had an incredible bad run. Cian Healy at one stage, you know, there's about 2 or 3 years there of just constant injuries and stuff like that, and he's come back and had an incredibly good run. And you hope when you come back from an injury that this is it for a while, you know, but unfortunately then you're kind of, it's like using up 9 lives, isn't it? You kind of keep going, and oh geez, is there more to come? And he's still very young, Dan Levy, and he hasn't had a huge injury profile throughout his career so far, but you know, he's had that disruption of the hamstring since before Christmas, and to come back now and to be having to be patient to work his way back, and just to get a serious injury like that, it's the worst part of sport.
Is it a positional thing? Because you mentioned O'Brien, O'Donnell, Levy. Like, you know, you've a lot of fellas in that kind of 6, 7, 8 seem to be nearly, you know, is it just a nature because they're going into contact?
No, I tell you, if you look at it, and it's just it's just the nature of having so many involvements in the game that, you know, wingers are probably not going to be involved in the tackle area as much as back rowers, or props maybe not.
Yeah.
Back rows are tracking all over the field, they're involved in so many things. So I think if you add up their moments in the game, they're much higher than anybody else, because it's that position in right in the middle, 6, 7, 8, is just involved in so much carries, tackles, breakdowns. And I suppose if you're involved so many times, you're going to increase the risk of something going wrong. But look, some of the injuries, and I'm not sure what it's like in the other sports, but some of the injuries are freakish ones. They're just, geez, if you were 1 second later, or half a second, or 1 step forward, or if this guy didn't fall on your leg, and it's just the nature of rugby. Unfortunately, he got his leg caught and damaged his knee, and it's hard, psychologically it's hard for players. So you talk about Jacob Stockdale, you know, he'll dust himself down and come back.
His body is still...
I'd rather be Jacob Stockdale this morning than Dan Levy, to be honest.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point, Ash. When you mentioned other sports and freak injuries and stuff, and half a second later or earlier, I was thinking of Tom Parsons last summer, and he's still not back to full form, and that must be very, very difficult.
It can happen to anyone, you know, and I've been on the operating table. I sat in the dressing room in Stockport in 2005, the start of the European season, and I thought my career's over. Mark Taylor tackled me by around the collar as I was kind of going to the side of him, put all his weight in my knees, studs got trapped on the ground, and my knee snapped inwards. You could hear it, and I knew straight away my knee is in bits here, and I said, that's career ending, you know. And we didn't have a huge amount of medical people with us. The doctor looked after me, but he had to get back out onto the field. There was 2 doctors with us, but they had to be there. So I'm sitting in the dressing room for a while thinking, Jesus, where am I going here? And it's the toughest part of sport, I think. Winning and losing, and the ups and downs of the other stuff, getting picked and dropped and all that kind of stuff. Everybody's going to experience that. You want to try and avoid those serious injuries. You know, we'll all pick up injuries, but it's the serious ones that can really have an effect, and it can stop your flow and momentum. And Tom Parsons, you know, that's a significant one, and it's psychologically, it can break you, because if you have such a long period, if you can see, well, look, it's going to be 6 months, you know, it goes, even though it's a long time, but if you're going to the 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 months, 12 month scenario, it's really, really tough. And it's not just the injury when you come back, it's the rest of the body. How do you keep that condition? That's. So
you're trying to stay fit, as well as fit as you can.
It's keeping the other muscles alive. You know what I mean? When I had my knee injury, I was in the gym probably 5, 6 days after the operation. I thought our rehab specialist at the time, Brian Green, was crazy, but he was trying to make sure the other muscles stayed alive, and the hammers and the calves and the glutes and the core. So we were doing other stuff, and that's modern sports science, where it's not just the actual injury, it's the other parts of the body. And we've seen so many sports people come back from knee injuries, and then they pull a hammer in the left leg, or their back gives them trouble, or it's.
And you damaged your shoulder as well in 2003, isn't that right?
Yeah, that was 2003. That was another big injury, and there was two big ones there that kind of hampered my career at times, and so for Dan Levy, it's just trying to get him to work. Yeah. He's got to be patient now.
What age is he?
He's 23.
He's
still young.
Yeah.
Sean O'Brien is, like, people have seen the injuries there over the years when he comes back for 2 games.
25 in May, Tommy's after telling me there in my ear, Dan Levy.
25 in May, okay, yeah. Well, he was
still very young.
I can't remember the age of all these fellas, but he's around a number of years and been very, very impressive, but still very young.
Yeah, and it's something actually as well, I think that I've actually been learning day to day now as well, that doctors need to be cognizant of. You can't just go in, say, geez, Quinny, that knee, you'd be 6 months and rock out of the room. You need to give that athlete support as well.
Yeah, but to be fair, he'll get great support and there's a great setup. I feel sorry for people in amateur sport who don't have, and I've seen my own friends in my rugby club in Tipperary are getting injuries and serious injuries, and it's hard to get you can't put a team around them to help them. They've got to try and work.
You mean the magic bottle of water doesn't work?
Magic sponge, when you go away. But if
doing that module next semester.
For any clubs, amateur GA players around the year, the country, if they get an injury on a Sunday and they've got they're thinking first of all, they're thinking work. What's the boss going to say? And I'm out for a week. When am I getting the operation? And then you're talking about physio and having the time to rehab and all that. So it's very difficult. Dan Levy will get a lot of good support, and it's tough on him, very, very tough, and it's just the nature of sport. Unfortunately, sometimes you can't explain them.
And that's the nature of sport as well. Leinster do march on, despite what they squeaked through. They were missing key players, but it's an interesting few weeks ahead for them now.
Yeah, it is. And look, Ulster, we shouldn't take anything away from Ulster's performance on Saturday. They were absolutely superb. I didn't see it coming. Not many people saw it coming. I thought an average Leinster performance still had them winning by 7 or 8 points and never looking like they were going to lose it. I thought Ulster would definitely bring a load of passion and energy and stuff, but it was their accuracy and the plan and the structure that they had that was most impressive. And they certainly sent out a message that, we're ready to come back to the top table and kind of dine there again. And it's great to see. And a lot of young players stepping up and performing really well, and it was just brilliant. Now, you could argue and say, when you break it down, and I'm sure Leo Cullen will, saying there was certain parts and mistakes they made, the block down, the hesitancy there from Ringrose for that try, and 7 points in tight games like that, it's a big squeeze and it's a big psychological boost. So Ulster and Leinster came back and scored, but they went again, and they felt there was a confidence and a self-belief there that they haven't seen in a number of years in that Ulster side, and they kept going and going. And unfortunately, John Cooney missing the conversion as well could have been really, really significant. And then it's just that habit of winning. I was talking about Mayo on breakfast this morning, and the psychological boost you can get from just getting over the line and the relief of that kind of stuff. And then when you win stuff, you have that kind of muscle memory, and whether it's brain memory to say, even on the bad day, we can still just maneuver our way into position to go, hold on a minute, no panic here. And Leinster kind of showed that no panic scenario in the second half, where they just slowed the game down a little bit. Rossbourne's penalty was phenomenal, and they just struck with that try from Adam Byrne as well, and they just were able to see the game out with good control. Yeah, and to be fair to him, he's cramping up, and to kick that penalty was incredible character and mental strength from Ross Byrne. He's kind of living in the shadow of Johnny Sexton.
After that, to kick.
Yeah, he has a chat with Rhys Ruddock, and that's exactly what you want from your kicker, to say, no, my mind is right, I want this, and he backed himself and ultimately won the game for Leinster. They got the good fortune of Toulouse beating Racing yesterday, and to have a home semi-final in Dublin, it's massive. Trying to piece people together and preparation and familiar surroundings, and it'll be a full house again in the Aviva, and all your home fans there. It's huge for Leinster. Toulouse were in Dublin in January, and they got walloped by a Leinster team that were missing a lot of players that day. So that'll be in the back of their mind. They will pose a very serious threat. There's no doubt about it. And they showed a lot of character themselves to win with 14 men yesterday against Racing. But you got to think now it's Leinster's to. I think they'll be in another final.
Yeah. Now, obviously, Munster would have something to say about that. They were in Edinburgh, and you were there.
Yeah, it was. It wasn't the best performance, and they didn't have a lot of possession. They made some mistakes. The big positive for them was their defence and the work rate and the endeavour they showed. And it doesn't always win you games, but it certainly made sure that they were in with a chance of getting a late score and turning the game. They were 13 points to 10 down in the second half. They had a penalty. Edinburgh had a penalty and it was reversed. Pierce Schumann hit Tadhg Beirne. It was minimal enough contact, but it was a penalty. People were giving out that Tadhg Beirne kind of melted a little bit.
Do you think he did?
Maybe a little bit. I thought initially that it was a serious injury because he stayed down. And I thought, Jesus, the last thing they need now is Tadhg Beirne going off when they're going to be 16-10 down.
Yeah.
And then suddenly we started seeing replays and stuff and seeing the contact and see what happened. He kind of flew out of the back line. But it was a penalty, and, you know, it's Edinburgh, Richard Cockrell will be fuming. He was fuming after the game. The Pierce Schumann had a brilliant game, the South African loosehead. But Munster kick up field and they end up scoring. Keith Earls, he was phenomenal, and I think the way he's played in the last few years has been unbelievable. The anticipation to take the quick penalty and strike early on and then score in the end. Munster could have been 14 points down in the first 15 or 20 minutes, and then suddenly they go up the field and they're 7 points up. It's a huge swing. It's massive, and they hadn't played any rugby, Anthony, you know, and look, we've heard this so many times, Munster never beaten, never write them off, all that kind of stuff, and we used to hear it as players, and it's kind of like that muscle memory we were talking about. That
feeds in.
It can kind of go into the group, and even though, you know, this group are trying to create their own legacy, they've been in the last two semi-finals and come up short.
Very short.
Will they come up short this time? Most probably. They're on the back foot. Everyone will write them off.
But that's a great
position. And that's when they'll possibly be dangerous. But it's just when you look at the Saracens team and the ability and the strength and depth that they have and the squad, the power, it's going to be very difficult. But they're in with a shot, so they're in kind of bonus territory. Yeah. You know, when you lose a match, if they lost the game on Saturday against Edinburgh, which on paper you're thinking, even though Edinburgh have been very good, Munster should be, if they want to have aspirations to close the gap in Leinster and win European Cups, you've got to be going to Edinburgh winning. And I mean that respectfully. If they'd lost that game Saturday, which they most probably should have on the balance of play, well, that would have been devastating. That would have been a really, really negative situation for them. They're in a place now where people expect Saracens to win. Can they produce a performance and rock them? Well, they're capable of upsetting them a little bit, but ultimately it'll come down to that bit of quality and who delivers on the day. So you want the old simple scenario of Saracens having an off day and Munster having a really incredible day, 8, 9, some 10 performances out of 10 for them
which
throughout
they're
their team.
capable of doing.
They are, and look, but I think when you underperform, you know that you can do a lot better. They can do a lot better with control and how they hold on to the ball and where they attack, and maybe it'll give them a little bit of freedom to have a real goal, because if they try and contain Saracens, which they did 2 years ago with kicking the ball up in the air, and they tried to contain them, that won't work. They've got to play and try and create something and hope a bit of spark comes somewhere, and you can see what happens in the way momentum changes in sport. If the underdog suddenly starts getting a score or two, or they get an intercept try, or a ball goes loose or something. So strange things can happen in sport, and they've got to believe and they've got to work their socks off now in the next couple of weeks to be ready for that. But I think Saracens are the team to beat in the last 4. I've said it before the quarter-final, they just have so much strength.
You've been banging that drum for a while, actually, and with reason.
You take Owen Farrell out of a Saracens team and you think, a little bit of vulnerability, but then you start rattling off the other names like Marouane Mako Vunapolo is injured at the moment, but then you go Billy Vunapolo, Maro Itoje, Skelton, the second row, Jamie George. The forwards are just so powerful. So Munster will be pleased though. There was this great sense of relief after the game, and they kind of stole it at the end.
When you're looking at a player like Keith Earls, and I use him as an example as a spectator, and you're watching him and you're thinking, there'll be some kind of magic coming here today. You never know what he's going to do. And I know athletes will always say, we don't prepare for what other teams can do, we'll only prepare for what we can do ourselves. But if you're going out to face Munster and you're thinking, they have that Keith Earls lad there and we don't know what he's going to do, how do you prepare to try and nullify that kind of person who has that special X factor?
You try and keep the ball away from him in rugby.
Is it that simple?
Well, it's not that simple. If you kick loosely to someone like Keith Earls or Jordan Larmour or Darcy Graham, who played for Edinburgh on Saturday, incredibly great footwork, and someone who just, if you give him space, they're that natural talent, Anthony, that go, they're these X-factor players in GA as well, and in soccer and everything. If they get time and space on the ball, they're going to hurt you. They're going to stretch you no matter what way you defend. Sometimes you can have a wall of defenders and they'll just pick a hole if they have space and they're coming, if it's stretched a little bit. So Keith Earls, he just has a really good knack of coming up with a big play and being in the right position, and his work rate is so high that he's continuously trying to look for the ball and he's looking for opportunities. And look, he showed brilliant pace to score the try, but when he gets the pass for the second try I'm talking about, it's that acceleration and that ability to kind of dive but touch the ball down in mid-air and make sure that he's getting that.
Yeah, he stayed low all the way through, didn't he?
You're talking about Keith, Stockdale maybe, maybe he needs to do a few of those, but Keith Earls is around a long time. He's someone who I keep saying, and I hope people don't think he was rubbish before this, but the last 3 years I think he's found a level of consistency that's just been immense, and he's openly spoke. I think he was Players' Player of the Year last year. He openly spoke about being more relaxed in himself and before being psychologically too hard on himself, going high when there's success, very, very low when it was disappointments. And just, he's young kids and he's an incredibly nice, grounded young fella. He's not a young fella anymore. But I remember him as a kid coming to Munster and playing with him and just going, wow, this guy is incredibly talented. But so he's very measured.
A bit more perspective on it.
Totally, and he's spoken about that, just going, he's gone home to his kids and saying, look, there's a different life to sport, and sometimes that's important, and getting that balance right. So he's found his balance in the last few years, and you look at the disappointment 2 weeks ago in Cardiff where him and his team were under so much pressure and that disappointment, and then they've got to dust yourself down in sport and go again. But I just thought he was superb. From Darren Sweetenham was brilliant. Someone who came into the game late and had so many high kicks to deal with and defended really well. So I think the big positives from Munster, obviously the obvious one is winning. That feel-good factor, that relief, that togetherness that you get from winning a game. And defensively they were superb. They were
winning when not playing especially well.
Yeah, so they have to play better, and they'll know that themselves. And the concern is where the try is going to come from against Saracens and Joey Carberry. Yeah, Joey Carberry going off with the hamstring is a big concern. They had him back. He was such a boost to have him back in the group, and then he goes off and he's icing the hammer. They say it tightened up.
How many weeks has he got?
It's 3 weeks. It's Sunday 2 weeks actually. So it'll be he would have just had over 3 weeks and a day to be ready for a game. So do you think he needs to be training like that whole week? Because he's got to test it now and make sure he's right. Yeah. But Tyler Blandell as well, that was a positive. He comes on, that conversion from the touchline was superb, so that'll do him the world of good as well. So they're on the back foot, but they're in a good place now. And I would, from analysing it from in the bigger picture, people won't expect them to win, but being in another semi-final, they're in the last 4 in Europe. It may end up being disappointing and they won't get their hands on the trophy this year, but it's something to build on for next year and maybe find a few more players and improve the overall
the fixtures
standard.
there in front of us. So Saracens are playing Munster April 20th, that's in Coventry, and then Leinster Toulouse April 21st in the Aviva. Very, very quickly before I let you go, very quick predictions. Who's going to win both semi-finals?
Leinster and Saracens.
that they'll be in the final.
Yeah,
You
I
heard
think
it here.
so. I hope I'm wrong, of course.
Of course you hope you're wrong, yeah.
Well,
But
I
no,
hope a Leinster and Munster final, that would have been incredible.
It'd be epic. It'd be amazing.
Newcastle.
Speaking of
St.
epic,
James'
thank you
Park.
very much, Alan,
Pleasure.
for coming in.